I'm always excited when people are actually killing each other.
So it's time for me to stop reading comics. This has been This Week in X, and I'll see you again in about 25 years. Welcome to This Week in X for Way of X #2, presented by Crushing Comics. This comic was out on the 19th of May, and we are here to discuss it deeply. You'll get our initial reactions, and then we will go into every spoil-filled detail of this, as well as other comics in the X-Men line and the Marvel Universe. To get started, we're going to begin with our initial reactions, starting with Tyler.
I'm sure by now you know that I like issues that are denser than most modern comics, and issues that feels like they are part of the greater Krakoa story. So this book achieved both. So it is thoughtful, it is funny, and I feel like it's going somewhere. So Bob Quinn's art, he seems more comfortable with the characters, and it is actually fast growing on me, even though issue 1 didn't quite gel with me 100%. This is a very solid 4.8 out of 5.
Harry.
Yeah, so I mean, this issue started a little shaky, which concerned me. And then with each passing page, this book got better and better and better. It's really, not really easy, but it is common to have a really great first issue full of promise and excitement. And then, you know, kind of riding high off that. And then the next issue comes in where you see the full structure of the thing and it becomes a little less impactful. This book actually avoided that. I think it sets up so many interesting things. I think it is so much fun. It is dense. I think we're going to be saying that a lot during this. There is so much happening. This is a, you know, for me personally, as a massive X-Men Legacy fan with Legion, this is a great pseudo sequel title to that. I was just happy as can be. And by the end of the book, I was just like, I think we're really in for something special here. So I'm going to give it a 4.75.
Fariha.
So sometimes when I really, really like something, I have this like urge to eat it. Like I feel like I'm going to take a bite at it. I have this feeling like anytime my cat is looking cute, like I want to go.
It's called cute aggression. It's a real thing.
Yeah. And my cat is like, yo, what's going on? You know. Yeah. So while I was reading this, I wanted to eat my iPad, because I was having so much fun reading it. I wanted to eat the iPad or do something. And if I had the physical copy, I would have eaten it by now. But I'm glad I don't. And I just have to do it digitally.
I'm also glad you don't.
Yeah, you know. So I want to say this was a home run. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I want only to be this. I don't care anything else anymore.
Wait.
Forget that. Forget all of that. Just give me this. Yeah, I just wanted to be this. So yeah, I would say a happy 5 out of 5.
For me, I enjoyed it and I really like some of the developments, but there are some things about this that I really didn't vibe very strongly with. I think with Spurrier, he gets lost in the mix of characters very quickly. I enjoy him when he's on a very mono-focused book. I loved his Hellblazer because he only really had to worry about Hellblazer. There was like 2 other characters in the supporting cast. And here I felt like there were probably 4 or 5 pages I could have just cut right out of this comic book and it would have been just as good. So that worries me a little bit. I know in the X-Men world, it's a kind of a good thing because we get to see more characters and everybody wants to see more X-Men characters. And there were great bits in here with Fabian Cortez, with Dazzler, with Loa. But it does make me a little bit nervous in the long run that we're going to fall back on the Spurrier stuff that I dislike, which is just being kooky all the time, and that I'm going to wind up hating this series. So I liked this issue a lot, but I am a little concerned, especially because of what it ended on, which is one of the harbingers of Peter quitting comics. But we'll get to that a little bit later in the discussion. Yep. So this comic, it's packed. We're just not going to talk about every page and every scene. We're just not. We're really going to focus on the things that are thematically strong, and then we'll have a Tyler Receipts corner to make sure that we haven't missed anything important. The first thing I want to go around on, though, and I want to start with Harry because he is such a big fan of Legacy, is the beginning of what we get of David's brain. So where we left off last time, we thought Nightcrawler was maybe dying. Instead, we see it's that David is not physically there. It's a psychic manifestation that has been disembodied from the rest of his brain. And we'll get into the why of that in a second. But this is a full-on psychic manifestation, not of Legion, just of David. He doesn't even want to be called Legion. He just wants to be called David. And he needs Kurt to save him, not for the good of him, because he's happy being David, but for the good of everything else. Because, as we'll shortly find out, although we're not going to dig into it in this round, Orcus has his brain. So Kurt is tasked with A, playing host to David's mind, and B, assembling a quick team that can take care of this problem. Harry, what did you think about all this development and the kind of Legion and David divide?
So the David aspect kind of definitely lined up with the X-Men Legacy book, just speaking to him sort of like trying to move past the superheroics and the costumes and the monikers and just be more of a person. So that felt right to lead off with at the beginning of this book. Then we get to his brain and you have this big, full page of just chaos within it, like kind of anarchy and like this like apocalyptic situation where everyone's attacking each other, but it doesn't totally look right. That was my first reaction, because when you look at the characters in the book, what's striking compared to X-Men Legacy's book, where his mental constructs and figures and personalities were all over the place, had all sorts of different shapes and like backgrounds and situations. These are all very super heroic in nature. They all have costumes, they have capes, they have this, and this. So I was thinking in the beginning, like, oh, is this just a poor interpretation of that book? Because this is much more generic in a way. But it's revealed later on in the book that the actual framing of this and the way it's all visualized is very purposeful, with intent for what Orcus wants to do with Krakoa. So it felt like a nice continuation and a an evolution of that book that I like so much, but it is using it in a different way that is still in spirit of this overall line, and with in service of Nightcrawler's character and all of that, where it's a hard line it's a hard needle to thread, where it is both living up to this thing that I love while also being just a part of a bigger thing, but not feeling like it's being short-served.
Tyler, without getting into the full implications of Anomi, what do you think about the things that Harry was just talking about?
I mean, I have to admit that I did not read Legacy from C, so I'm not familiar with him as a writer. I like this this whole thing about separating David from his other personalities, as what Orcus is trying to do, basically, using him as a model and using him cheaply as a model because you just need one brain to do it. Of course, there are consequences, as we saw later in the episode, in the issue. So I mean, for me, this was a surprise for me, because I did not know that was where the story is going. I did not know that that the Legion that we saw at the end of issue 1 is just a psychic manifestation. So that was actually a pretty good surprise for me, and I enjoy this. I enjoy seeing where this leads.
Fariha, what about you? And have you read that X-Men Legacy run?
Oh, of course I have.
Okay.
Unlike others in the panel, I have read X-Men Legacy. So the thing is, I actually I really enjoyed Legion in the original, in the X-Men Legacy before the X-Men Legacy, but when Mike Carey was writing him, and in the New Mutant run, and then there was this whole thing, and I think Dr. Nemesis points out about it, that how he cataloged every one of his personality and put them in different cells for him. Like, he pretty much put them in different doors and different places for him. But then in Legacy, when we get there, it starts to break apart. Like, they were kind of all over the place and stuff. It's like a jail. That. Yeah, the jail starts to break apart, and then there was like a Professor X in there, which kind of caused all the chaos and everything. So that's where we kind of left off. And over here, I was fascinated by how his brain is being used by Orcus. I talked about how much I hate the whole hunted and fear aspect, and then the stupid, bigoted, racist people that they have to fight. To me, I feel like this Orcus is something that I'm like, yeah, they are actually worthy rival for them. It's not just outside with a stupid thing. It's like, oh, get mutant out of here.
Yeah, or the Hellfire
dumb.
Kids.
Yeah, some dumb shit like that. But it's mostly about using their own power against them and using a scientific way of getting to them. And what better way to find one mutant who can replicate them all in his own head and try to find the simulation on how to end it. I thought that was fascinating, that was scary, and that is something that is X-Men have a worthy opponent now. Like it just felt like something that they should be worried about. And so I'm all in for that.
Yeah, I think that my reaction was really similar to yours, which is that a lot of the books are playing out similar themes right now. I mean, we've seen it with Choir in X-Force. We're seeing it in Wolverine this week, that there's a lot of playing with parts of bodies having been taken into custody and exploiting that. But because Orcus is so central to this whole Dawn of X, Reign of X, because it's from Hoxpox, because we've seen teases of it in things like Sword, this just felt like it had a lot more heft. Plus, it's Legion. It just holds a lot more weight for me than, having Domino's body and using it for luck. So part of me was like, this is a repeated plot beat, but part of me thought, but it's actually kind of a perfected plot beat. And I think it's okay that some of these plot beats are being repeated because it's emphasizing what the big themes are of this. But there's no question that we've seen this 4 times in a row. I just think this executed really, really well.
Well, and it also, more so than just like using a body or trying to mess with the mutant bodies and the DNA, what have you, like this is them trying to attack or find the weaknesses of Krakoa on a societal level. This is big picture attacking. This isn't just we're going to make a better weapon or find a way to like bypass Krakoa's security by using mutant DNA. This is, we want to find ways to just destabilize this entire concept and speed that up.
Well, I mean, that's the reason why, the fifth panel was like so dismissive of the second panel, because it's like, oh yeah, Henry Grage know that this is a Legion's brain, but what is he going to do with it? He's just going to weaponize it, and he doesn't know anything, and well, obviously, Spiral reads Wolverine because they bought it from Legacy House.
Yeah.
Which is the auction house.
Glad you remember that.
The other thing I was gonna say though is like it's also kind of shows that they're escalating. They probably started with Domino and then other mutants, but the fact that they managed to get David or Legion and they managed to capture him, it's a scary concept on its own because he's very hard. Like unless he wants to be captured, it's very hard to capture him. So either he went in there knowingly, knowingly that, he is going to be. So it just, I mean, I don't know, because he's a reality warper. If he wants, he can warp the reality and be like, this is not the reality. I'm rewriting it. So I don't know. I mean, to me, that made them scarier in a way.
So for a question for the people who have been reading the X-Men comics a bit more than me, I mean, has David shown up since X-Men Legacy, which ended in 2013? So he came back after that?
He had a mini-series that was not great.
Right.
By
that was recent.
Milligan.
Okay.
It was, I mean, I don't think it changed him that much, but it put him back on the map after the end of X-Men Legacy by Spurrier was kind of everybody forget me.
Well, he wrote himself out of existence.
Right.
So I was reading this, I was kind of like, I'm not going to get bothered by it, but I'm like, I guess he's back. I'm sure something happened.
I guess he's back is a better outcome than going back and reading that miniseries, in my opinion. I don't know if Tyler agrees with me, but
I mean, he was the one behind Prison X too.
Okay. Right, Age of X-Men kind of, because all X-Men got swept in.
I didn't finish it.
So the Ruth encounter mentioned here probably happened before Prison X, because I don't think Ruth was captured. Ruth was never in Age of X-Men.
Right.
Ruth was outside Age of X-Men. Yeah. So that conversation happened before that age. So
it happened in Legacy that you didn't read.
Oh yeah. Okay. Fine.
So I want to move us a little bit forward because we've all hinted at something, and so now I want to go into it full scale. But first, Kurt very wisely picks Nemesis. Spurrier very wisely picks Nemesis, because this is a full-on sequel right now to Spurrier's X-Men Legacy. Like, if you haven't read it, Tyler and dear listeners, it might be time. It's not my favorite comic book, but this is absolutely referring to everything that happened in that series. So it's important. And then also bringing Pixie along as kind of like a little signpost of the group of people that he was, interacting with, and also a reminder of Blind Spot, and also to bring some magic into it, as Legion points out. But we get to this term that Dr. Nemesis shouts out, anomie, which is the idea of kind of an everyone for themselves version of society, where it's breaking down due to everybody acting in their own chaotic self-interest. And this is what's happening in David's brain, or the Legion brain that David has been separated from. But it's not just happening on its own, although it may have. There is an invasive exotic, which is the name of one of Spurrier's arcs on X-Men Legacy. And that invasive exotic appears to me to be a tiny Nimrod from Powers of X, who is going around saying, me before we, me before we, me before we. And I don't know that I have been shocked this hard by a moment in an X-Men comic since, like, Bring Back My Wife. I mean, it was Nimrod from Powers of X.
Yeah.
So, I felt so stupid when you texted me, like, can you believe it? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't realize that was Nimrod. I didn't see the design. I was like, oh, I guess it's some kind of robot. All right.
Well, because Harry read first, and usually we don't talk in the group chat, but I was like in my house, like frothing at the mouth. And I think I read it before going to sleep at night instead of the next morning. And I was like, ah! And so Harry said that he read it. And I was like, what about Nimrod? And Harry didn't know what I was talking about. So Tyler, we'll get into to the end of Legion's brain in just a moment, but what do you think about Enemy and Nimrod?
I mean, this Nimrod is definitely modeled after Nimrod the Greater,
right,
in Life 9, which is that small Nimrod that's floating around with the
almost cute and likable.
Yeah. So so that's the thing, which kind of like struck me as like, whoa. So AUKUS, even though they lost the Mother Mole, they actually managed to create their own Nimrod somehow.
Yeah.
Or the whole thing could be revealed in X-Men issue that is coming out next week.
I feel like that is probably the likely scenario, right?
It could be that, yeah. And the other thing is this whole notion of how do you pronounce that word? Enemy. Yeah. Is struck me as very similar to Life 6 Lost Years of Mutant Leadership, because they removed the core personality, which is David, from his other split personality, and then everyone just go crazy. And that, the Life 6 Lost Years, where when they talk about the mutant leadership, it says it follows almost universal death and disappearance of the senior leaders of Krakoa, the Life 6 Krakoa, and then that led to the fall of Krakoa and Mars. So that was
Life 9.
Life 9.
Okay.
Life 9. So that was like the part which I was kind of like, oh, whoa. That's the one that really struck me, as in like this plan has sort of like moved much earlier, in a sense. Like they are already testing out that plan of how to remove the what happens when the core leadership of a society is removed, and then everyone with no structure, everyone, as evidenced by issue 1 of Way of X, is like, destructive behaviors, basically no structure. They do whatever they want. They can die. So, again, they do whatever they want. And so I thought that was a really interesting part.
Let's go to Harry, and then I'm sure Fariha has some things to say about the state of Enemy, so we'll end this round on Fariha.
Yeah. So, not talking about the Nimrod part, which I think is, cool, and I'm excited to see where that progresses. What I like about the choice this story made is that basically with this concept, Wall Orcus, in this simulation introduces an invasive exotic. That does not cause the root problem of just things falling apart and succumbing. There's still just this problem of this society might be headed towards total moral and physical ruin, if not for something that might change that. I think the book's obviously going to be positing that Kurt is going to be the situation or the force that changes them from the way they're going. So it's not letting the society off the hook by saying, oh, we put in this external Nimrod factor. It's saying, no, there are still inherent problems here. We want to find ways to capitalize on those. And it's a really smart thing to do, because it's still like inviting those interesting thoughts and discussions about what kind of place is this going to be, while also having more intrigue with a killer robot or that sort of thing. And also just from an art perspective, I do like how, like, it's not like one-to-one, but there are many figures in this that are kind of like X-Men, but kind of not. There's some that look like a Nightcrawler. There's one that looks a lot like the time traveled young Beast from Bendis's run with the goggles when he gets the Guardians of the Galaxy crossover. It was like a nice, like, it's similar enough to remind you of Heroes, but not like fully to just be like kind of cheap in that way, I guess.
Well, I think that's because that Orchis doesn't care about what the X-Men actually looks like. They're just replicating the power. Their powers.
I just mean, I'm speaking more from like Quinn's artwork. I just think it was a nice choice that he made, more so than like story.
So the thing is that I only kind of figured out it was Nimrod because of the pink. Because what else I forgot like what it looked like. I was like, oh, it's a pink robot. That means in X-Men world, it's Nimrod. That's how I made the connection for that. But the thing is, like, I think the Me Before We, it's actually a lot more than just what the Nimrod is kind of going around trying to propagandize, in David's head and stuff. But it also kind of shows that how the Quiet Council is. The Quiet Council is very much Me Before We. Like, that they themselves, even though they say differently, but they themselves said that Me Before We. There was a lot of leadership within different books who are also Me Before We, in the sense that I'm going to protect my team and I'm not going to let my team be used other places. We know who you're talking about. However, that's pretty much the same thing as Orchis is also. Orchis also have these 5 petals and everything, but one petal doesn't like the other, and they're kind of like a backstabbing thing, and then it's like, oh, I need to show that mine is better and everything. So there's each society, obviously we don't want Orchis to win, but the thing is, like, the Krakoa itself is falling apart already because of that mentality. Everybody's there because of their own agenda, not necessarily for the whole society.
Something that really interests me about a lot of this is none of these themes just play out in one book. And, we've all read a lot of Hickman. Some of us have read all of Hickman ever. And this just feels like, to me, it reminds me of like early Hickman, the stuff that Fariha and I really love, like Pax Romana. I really love Nightly News, and it feels like one of those books and the thematic core of those books, but then saying, hey, everybody, let's do some variations on a theme, like play with this. And I love it because, we've seen Enemy versus in multiple titles. I think you all raise a good point that the Quiet Council, even though it proposes to be a council as every person for themselves, New Mutants is absolutely playing with Enemy and what happens when all of these kids have no greater purpose other than just pleasure in the world. I think we've seen a lot of books turning to this, and this is just one of the great things that this era of X-Men is doing, which is that you don't actually have to read every book. I know a lot of people are like, oh, there's 10 books. Like, yeah, it's a lot, and it's a lot to read, and it's a lot of money. You should just get Marvel Unlimited. That's the cost of just 2 books a month. But also, you don't have to read all of them. You will get the theme across them, even if you're reading half of them or a third of them, and the theme is being developed in different ways across all of them. And that's a feature, not a bug. It's no mistake that they're covering similar stuff. And I just think it's an interesting take on Omega Mutants to say that it kind of jives and doesn't jive with the way that we were reintroduced to Omega Mutants way back in Hawks #1, which is that there's only 14 of them. Like they're way bigger in scope than we used to think. They're people that take this to the limit, but that's from a mutant power perspective. But then what happens when you apply like a systems thinking to that? Like if Legion is the Omega Mutant of manifestations of power, then that also means that you can use him as a model of what happens with infinite manifestation of power. But what happens if we look at Iceman through that lens? What happens if we look at Storm transform through that lens. It's really kind of like the Rubik's Cube model of turn it and look at it from a different direction. And that's what Orcus is doing. And that really gets to one of the core things that's my favorite thing thematically going on, which is a lot of different people looking at the concept of what does Omega mean? What does machine mean? What does society mean? And turning it from different angles. That's when these comics, I think, are at their best right now. And so that's why when he yelled enemy, and before they even started talking about it, I'm like, I don't know that word. I better go to Google. So then I Dr. Googled it, and I was like, oh. And then, of course, it played out on the page with the addition of Me Before We, the invasive exotic. We are going to have a Tyler's Receipts Corner in case there's any receipts to look at, but I want to finish this thread first. Legion knows that to reboot his mind, he's going to have to get resurrected. And that's going to end their experiment, and also kind of just like crashing the Sentinel into the sun way back in Hawks 3 and 4. Nemesis, of course, is eager to murderize him, because what is Nemesis?
Best panel in the book when he's just like, yeah,
option.
I mean,
but
Nemesis
Kurt
over
ultimately.
Here,
yeah.
No, I was just gonna say Nemesis is channeling his inner Fariha throughout the issue. I just want to put that out there. It's like, yes, I'm ready.
I mean, I was reading Nemesis as like Spiro's avatar. Basically, Spiro is writing himself into Krakoa based as Nemesis. It's like
that's definitely there.
I mean, it felt that way for me because I mean, some writers, when they do that, you immediately feel like, oh, okay, he's writing himself into the book as himself. And typically those characters get the best line, as in here.
He doesn't get the headshot because Kurt volunteers himself. Interesting, because Kurt is usually very anti-violence, but it actually, we see through his data page, opens the way for him. It changes his mind about the rules he used to be operating on and the rules that we need to shift to operate on, which is a major change for Nightcrawler. And he starts to say, Father, forgive me, as he takes that shot. And he says, oh, never mind, which is a huge, huge cadence in the life of Nightcrawler. Does anybody want to talk about that before we move on?
I mean
everybody wants to. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll go Fariha, Harry, Tyler.
I just have a small point. So maybe I just name it first. I just say that I just think that it tracks with that page of the ship in the storm, in the middle of the storm, because basically the way I read it is like Kurt is lost. He's not sure who he is anymore, and therefore this whole development within this issue just tracks for me. It works because we show his conflicted mind, and we show how he basically abandoned one section of him and say that, no, forget it. I'm just going to start. I'm just going to do this.
Yeah.
Fariha?
I know I'm always super excited by characters who should be killing all the time because of the type of the risk place that they're in, and they're like, I'm not gonna kill, I'm gonna fight other ways. I'm gonna maim people. I'm gonna drop them from building. I'm gonna do all sorts of other things, but I'm not gonna kill people. So I'm always excited when people are actually killing each other, because I'm like, yes, come to my world. I can't do that because I can't do time. I'm really scared of jail and not having access to shower all the time, but I want to live through that. So I loved seeing this development of him, because, we have it's because his whole idea, his whole religion and everything it really does not work anymore. And if he has all his choice to keep it, a lot of other X-Men who I shall not name are keeping their old ways, and that's fine. But you know what? You're going to become you're going to become, you will be erased. You will be forgotten, and you will not be able to keep up with it. So it's the whole idea of grow up or leave, be useful. And I think of all the people, Nightcrawler is pretty much the first one I've seen who have taken that leap in this new era of Krakoa. And I am all about it, because I'm like, yes, Nemesis have already been there, but now Kurt is there too. Yes.
All right, Harry, wrap us up on this topic.
Well, first of all, Fariha, we got to get you to talk about the boys, because that's totally just the boys mentality of like, we got to get these superheroes killing. But
there's other things we can talk about.
No, you're gonna make her rage quit comics again.
I know. No. So basically, I really like this section for two reasons. Number one, I do, yes, he is killing someone, but what he is doing really is, it's laid out pretty clearly in the text, is that this is a leap of painful empathy, which is working through all these conflictions and emotions that he is in and doing something that, is very wrong as a Catholic. I'm not, I was a little affected by that, even my own wayward way. And but still like working through all of that pain to, in this case, do something that someone else wanted. And that puts Kurt in a very weird position, a different position that I don't think we've seen him before. What I also liked is that this data page, we were speaking about, early Hickman. This was one of the data pages that remind me the most of like early Hickman books, where this is very clearly like some kind of ancient text that is very clearly being talked about like later on. And this is the first moment of this big thing. Now we've had data pages that play around and just use the form differently. This felt like something that you'd see in Pax Romana or Avengers or but yeah, it's definitely just him moving away from Catholicism into some kind of new kind of philosophy or movement. And I feel like, not to keep saying it, but I feel like that, it'll be very much based around painful empathy, whatever that means. So that means like sacrifice or putting yourself in uncomfortable positions for others, like favor for a favor. I feel like we're seeing the beginnings of what this is going to look like with this page. And I thought that was really cool.
And we shouldn't forget that, this also came from Way of X, when Lost, the new mutant, was asking for his help and he wasn't listening. And then he saw what happened when he didn't help her. Yeah. And so this is kind of like a reminder from that. So it's like, okay, I didn't help.
That's a good point.
That other mutant, but now this time around I will.
Yeah.
I mean, this also, sorry, Peter, just jumping in here, is that, I mean, in Buddhism, you are looking for the middle path, and that means you're straying. You do not want to do the extremes. You do not want extreme comfort. You do not want extreme discomfort, and you want to be moderate in the middle path. And here I feel like Kurt is swinging. So in Krakoa, he's enjoying all the comforts that he could, right? So that is one extreme, and then this is, I think, another extreme that he's abandoned. He's putting himself in, like doing something that he would never do, to kill someone. But in this case, you could also argue that he's trying to rescue Legend.
Oh, he is.
Yeah. So it's not exactly killing or murdering in a sense.
And it's more ambiguous because he's killing, or he's killing because Legion asked him to. He also knows he'll probably come back. So it's like this, it's not as extreme or black and white as he's broken bad. It's more like he's putting himself in these uncomfortable positions that he is not used to. And there's more, I think, ambiguity and nuance there that makes me more interested in where he's going to go next.
Yeah, I think to a degree, all three of you are talking about the idea of evolution of belief. And it reminds me a lot just about the conversation around, in America, around the Constitution, around how to interpret laws, and whether you should be a strict constructionalist or whether you should assume that the modern day changes the way that we should interpret things. Here's Kurt, devout and knowledgeable about a religion and trying to apply that religion to a world where the rules have fundamentally changed. Death is not death in the same way, and not just in the revolving doorway that it typically is with the X-Men and even with himself, but in a way where he absolutely knows that the consequences of him ending Legion's current existence are not the same as the consequences of murder that his religion is addressing. And so I think it's this wonderful dual-chambered effect, because on one hand, you have Kurt reinterpreting his own faith through the lens of how has Krakoa changed the rules. But then you can immediately tell through the narration, through what's happening in this book, that Kurt is going to force Krakoa to reinterpret their laws in light of the reality of the world that was created by the existence of Krakoa, which is actually really mirrors what happens in modern democracy very well. Like, a country by existing alters the nature of the world around it, and then eventually they have to reinterpret the things that they've decided as a country because of the effects that they have as a country. And you certainly can see that if you're a student of American history, but you can see it as a student of history in many other places as well. And that, to me, is it is the transition to the reign of X. When you enter this rulership phase, this leadership phase, this hegemony, this decadent phase, you have to start asking questions about if the laws you made for yourself are serving you or just hurtling you to your downfall, in the way of Rome. And I think that this has that encoded in a very little amount of text. And I think that's wonderful. Before we get to the final revelation, without talking about anything about coins in Kurt's mind or Patchwork Man or anything we might have seen in the clouds, I'm going to turn it over to Tyler for any receipts he would like to bring up. There's a lot of other scenes in this comic. We can't recap them all, but I know I have one thing that I thought was really important. But Tyler, anything that you want to bring to our attention that readers may have missed?
I don't really have much here. I think my main receipts was the whole the wrong receipt, Life 9 part. And then, I don't have anything too much to add here. Apart, I do have one question though. Why was Legion unhappy with, not unhappy, thinks that the choice of Pixie is pragmatic of Nightcrawler?
I really got the sense that it was harshly because of the soul dagger, because magic is something that has defeated and unlocked Legion previously, as we saw with the opening arc of Zeb Wells' New Mutants, with magic kind of leveraging, I guess the whole arc of Zeb Wells' New Mutants, kind of leveraging elder gods and things to kind of play a trump card on Legion. So failing having magic, bringing Pixie, who does have a soul dagger rather than a soul sword, is kind of like a suitcase nuke version of bringing magic with you. That I haven't read that stuff. Fariha's read it way more recently than us. Fariha, do you think there was any other reason that he reacted so strongly to Pixie?
I thought it was that, and versus that Pixie was also Ruth's friend, Blindspot's friend. Blindspot, they kind of hang out. Blindfold, sorry. Yeah. They kind of hang out together. So I think it was. I wonder whether the way I interpreted it, I forgot about the magic thing, but then later okay. But I thought that it was more like, it's your friend, Blindfold's friend, that someone you should know. That's who I'm bringing with me. I thought that it was mostly he was kind of more annoyed by that you're trying to what you call it, what's the word,
manipulate his emotions or something.
An emotional tether to
humanity. You're trying to manipulate me that way, or what's the word? Anyway, I'll remember that.
Well, the one thing that I pulled out was Loa expresses that she patronize. Loa expresses that she has a little bit of a crush on Mercury. And I went back through previous Loa because I couldn't remember if she had expressed any kind of desire for any gender previously. She does have a brief fling with Elixir at one point, but she's not a character who's been written with a lot of romantic tendencies. So this is Spurrier not only giving us specific women love women content, but making it's not ambiguous. I mean, she clearly has a crush on Mercury, who is established as a lesbian character previously in the comics. And I just thought that was nice. I like when these Academy X kids get texture, and Loa is one who's been used a lot, especially if you read that kind of Namor series in 2010 or The Deep or any of that stuff, and then kind of got put to the side. So I like that Spurrier has gathered this little circle of mutants that he is going to write some developments for, and it's not just Pixie, who's kind of part of that upper class of characters who got used a lot outside of Academy X. Pixie, Choir, Anil. There's a few of them that were the lucky ones, and Loa's not quite in that super popular class, I don't think. So I was really pleased, and of course we like seeing more representation on the page, especially in a scene that was, I thought, really adorable, like her saying we could just all go together as a group, but also it'll be with me, with her. Now we're going to talk about
one question before we move on. Yeah. What's your thought on Mercury's Sinister what's his name? Oh my god, Dr. Nemesis. Nemesis is fierce criticism of Dazzler's music, because I'm he made an enemy of Peter today.
His tastes are rooted in World War II music. He likes big band, which I'm sure Dazzler could front big band and it would be good. But I also that was where Spurrier was kind of losing me, not because it's like anti-Dazzler. Like I'm not that kind of let's talk Dazzler Twitter account sort of person. But like, did we need 2 pages? Like there's so many other things. Now it does look like Dazzler's going to continue to be in the cast in this book based on that she's in the Hellfire Gala issues illustrations of the Way of X characters, and she's on some of the future covers. So maybe it's setting up some stuff, which is great. But I just felt like there's so many other more dense things in here that 2 whole pages of that scene with Dazzler and Cortez just felt a little indulgent to me. But we got to talk about the end of the issue now. Sorry, we are. So the end of the issue is there's a coin in Kurt's mind. And the coin is kind of like a thumbprint of the Patchwork Man who's been going around and looking over people's shoulders, which we do see in the corner of a panel here at one point. Legion's theory is that he's not the Patchwork Man, nor is Orcus's manipulation of Anome the Patchwork Man with an invasive exotic. The Patchwork Man is actually the reason he does not trust his father, nor Magneto. You will note, kind readers, that Legion restores himself in the resurrection process, which means he is backed up from the second that he was killed. Because I was like, oh crap, he's not going to remember any of the stuff that just happened with Kurt or with the Anime. No, he remembers everything because he put his own backup in Kurt's. It's like when you have a boot disk for a computer and you put it in, it just starts up. He put his own backup in Kurt's head, knowing Kurt would go to the resurrection chamber, and it just reboots himself. But the reason he doesn't trust Daddy Xavier or Magneto is he is pretty sure Patchwork Man is the literal patchwork of them two, namely Onslaught. So it's time for me to stop reading comics. This has been This Week in X, and I'll see you again in about 25 years.
I have read
this is also the same point that made me stop collecting X-Men comics.
Yeah.
Is the
Hickman and Onslaught. Those are the 2 things that can get me to quit comics, and here they are together.
Fariha, have you ever read a comic with Onslaught?
Oh, God.
No, I have not.
Okay,
I just only read the Wikipedia page. But the thing is, it's a super fascinating idea, though. So why did it have made... Yeah, it's a super fascinating idea.
It's not that. Why is it a super fascinating idea?
Like, because it's the worst part of Magneto, worst part of Xavier, and they're combined, right? That's Onslaught, correct?
Yes.
So isn't that what like Krakoa is? Like, it's the best part of...
It is Krakoa.
The best part of Xavier and best part of Magneto.
Oh, so it's like the other side of the coin of Krakoa is Onslaught.
That's
I don't know
anything.
Thinking. I don't know anything about this character. I just was like, oh, he is the byproduct of Magneto and Xavier. This is a book with Xavier's literal son. This is going to be good stuff. There's good parallels there, connections there. And also that last page is really good. The drawing, because the formation in the clouds.
Yeah, because it kind of reminded me that the fact that they were talking about that there is a potential plague, like, you know, there's like like, I don't know, I was trying to look for it, but I've kind of lost the thread on that. But it just felt like, you know, they're trying to infect all the mutants, so it kind of looked like a plague is coming.
No, but it's not infect all the mutants. The way I read it is that only the resurrected mutants could see Patchwork Man.
Yeah,
which means that it was intentionally or unintentionally placed in their mind by Xavier.
Even better. Let's explore the shit out of this. Okay. So, but the thing is, like, no, the way I was looking at it, it's like this is like the opposite, because Krakoa, as it stands right now, everybody's on their best behavior. At least Xavier and Magneto is on their best behavior. So this is the worst version of them, which is there. It hasn't been dealt with, and it's going to come back. I thought that it was one of the idea that even though back in 90s, it may have made you all quit X-Men, but now the idea will be bring back to make it, modernize it, and then do something different with it. I am all on board for that. But at the same time, it's very sure that the way he was like, yeah, you two are up to something. You two know something. So he definitely knows about Moira.
No, he knows. That's the point he mentioned about secrets. When he says, I have secrets and shadows, right? So secrets, I immediately went to Moira. And not just because you said that. Yeah.
He said, I can smell it. He's not like, I know. He's like, I know you guys are up to something, but I don't think he knows exactly what yet.
Oh,
no. He knows based on Fariha's Age of X theory.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's like based on the Age of X. Yeah. Like, you know, it's like he knows. He's like, you know, I can smell it on you guys. Like, you know, and I was like, whoa.
No, and then the other thing is that we are meant to think that Onslaught is is the weaponization that is introduced by the 6 petals of AUKUS. But is it though?
I don't.
No, it's not.
I don't.
Definitely not, because they don't have the.
It's not, right?
No.
So
I think your whole thing that it's a intentional or unintentional thumbprint of Xavier being left on the mutants that he resurrects is, I think you nailed it.
I think that, yeah.
And in the same way that Onslaught was like psychically distributed originally, I think this storm cloud of Onslaught is psychically distributed across all of the resurrected mutants. And the more mutants get resurrected, which they're on a schedule, it's coming faster. There's this really weird moment prior to Legion's actual resurrection, where they're talking about later, Krakoa would speak of a moment, the hairs raised on their arms, the air felt heavy. It was inevitable. Some would respond to these portents with alarm, either sensing or guessing their meaning, while others were gripped by older instincts to witness, to protect, to balance. And it even talks about how the 5 are feeling unsettled. And I think it's a misdirect. We're supposed to be thinking that it's because Legion's back, but I think it's actually about the Onslaught, the critical mass of Onslaught being reached because of however many resurrections they've kind of been doing or have been done.
And real quick, we cannot ignore Cyclops walking around with his dry cleaning in that one panel. That's my favorite thing I've seen in a long time.
Well,
I was like, yeah, Captain, walk around with your dry cleaning. Why not?
Good, bro.
I mean, yeah, it's just like it almost sounds like he wants me to hate him. I don't know why.
Well, here's the tag that I'll put on this before we wrap up, is that I like when we get stuff that's from the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. I think reverence of the oldest comics all the time is frankly bullshit. And I'm on the record as saying, like, if we got rid of every X-Men that ever debuted before 40 years ago, even if I'd lose some favorites, I would like that because I'd rather move it forward. And I think that this is much like the coin in Nightcrawler's brain. It's a double-sided coin. If we get more 90s stuff that we think is cool and deserves to get re-explored, we're like even Legion himself, we're going to get some 90s stuff that some of us would prefer not to see re-explored, whether that's Onslaught or Maggot or whatever you didn't like from the 90s. But the thing is, like, these are creators who came up with those 90s comics, as Tyler and I did. And to them, this is the fun stuff that they've always wanted to play with. So, you know, I think that hopefully there's value in reinterpreting it. But I just think it's funny because immediately on Twitter, people started being like, do I have to read Onslaught now? And then somebody tagged me and they're like, Crushing Comics, what is your recommendation for Onslaught? And my one-word reply to that tweet was, run. So that has been our discussion of Way of X #2. There's so much else to talk about, but there's only so much you can fit into a single This Week in X. If you're looking for us talking about other X-Men comics, just look elsewhere on the channel, because we talk about all of them. And why do we get together and talk about all of them, Fariha?
Before I do my catchphrase, I want to say, though, there was dupe sighting in one of the panels. That was mwah. But yeah, we get together because X-Men is better when it's read together.
And when you get into a group, there's always somebody who doesn't mind Onslaught. There's somebody who doesn't hate Dupe. You get to spread the emotion all around, so it's not quite as focused. So on behalf of myself, Tyler, Harry, and Fariha, until we get to speak to you again, we hope that you're well, and we look forward to seeing you for more this week in X on Crushing Comics.